Hi, my name is Flora Watson, and I'm 29 years old. I've always been the responsible one in my family. You know, the one everyone calls when they need something fixed, when they need money, when they need someone to clean up their messes. I thought that's what family meant. I thought that's what love looked like. God, was I wrong? You know that feeling when you realize everything you've worked for, every boundary you've tried to set, every ounce of respect you've tried to earn from your own family is just nothing to them? It hits you like a freight train when you finally see that the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones taking advantage of you the hardest. That's exactly what happened to me 3 months ago, and honestly, I'm still processing the rage I feel about it. It was a Tuesday night around 11 p.m. I was finally winding down after a long day at work. I'm an accountant, so I spend my days managing other people's money responsibly, making sure every cent is accounted for. The irony of what happened next still makes me sick. I had just gotten into bed when my phone buzzed. A text from my younger brother Derek. "Hey Flora, need $3,000 for a Christmas trip to Aspen with friends. Can you transfer it tonight? I'll pay you back after New Year's." Just like that. No please, no explanation of why he couldn't pay for his own vacation. No acknowledgement that $3,000 is a lot of money to just hand over. Just a demand, like I'm some kind of ATM with a family relationship attached. I stared at that message for a good 5 minutes, feeling my blood pressure rise. This wasn't the first time. Derek had borrowed money from me for his spring break trip, for his car payments when he decided to buy something way out of his budget, for his rent when he chose partying over responsibility. The pattern was always the same. Ask Flora. Flora will fix it. Flora always says yes, because that's what good sisters do. But something was different that night. Maybe I was just tired of being the family bank. Maybe I was tired of working my ass off just to fund other people's fun. I typed back a simple message. No, that's it. Just no. Not, I can't afford it. Or, maybe next time. Or any of the soft excuses I usually made to avoid conflict. Just a clear, simple boundary. Derek's response came back within minutes, and I could feel the entitlement dripping through the screen. "Come on, Flora. Don't be like this. It's Christmas. Family helps family. Family helps family." Those words still make my stomach turn because of how weaponized they became in my household. It's amazing how family helps family only ever seemed to flow in one direction, toward Derek, toward my parents when they made poor financial decisions, toward everyone except me. I put my phone on silent and went to bed, thinking that was the end of it. I thought I had finally stood up for myself. I thought I had finally set a boundary that would stick. I woke up the next morning to 17 missed calls and a bank notification that made my heart stop. A charge for $3,047 had been processed from my savings account to some travel booking site. My hands were shaking as I opened my banking app, and there it was, a massive chunk of my carefully saved money gone. The rage that hit me in that moment was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It wasn't just anger, it was betrayal, it was violation, it was the crushing realization that my own family had stolen from me. Because that's what it was, theft. I hadn't authorized that transaction. I had explicitly said no. I called my bank immediately, my voice trembling with fury as I explained the situation. That's when I learned the devastating truth. My mother was still listed as an authorized user on my account from when I was in college, something I had completely forgotten about. She had used that access to book Derek's trip after I refused. When I confronted my mother about it, her response was so casual, so dismissive, that it still haunts me. "Oh, honey, Derek really needed this trip. He's been so stressed with work. I knew you'd come around eventually, so I just helped speed things along. You can afford it. I knew you'd come around eventually. Like my consent didn't matter. Like my explicit no was just a starting point for negotiation. Like my financial boundaries were suggestions rather than firm decisions about my own damn money. Mom, I said no. I specifically said no, and you stole from me. Don't be so dramatic, Flora. It's not stealing when it's family. Derek will pay you back. Derek will pay you back. The same promise I'd heard dozens of times before, and the money I'd never seen returned. But this time was different because this time they hadn't even asked. They had just taken. I spent the next 3 days in a state of emotional turmoil that I can barely describe. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't focus on anything except the violation I felt. It wasn't just about the money, though $3,000 was a significant hit to my savings. It was about the complete disregard for my autonomy, my choices, my right to say no to my own family. The calls kept coming. Derek acting like nothing had happened, texting me updates about his trip planning. Thanks, sis. You're the best, he wrote, like I had willingly given him the money. My parents called to mediate, which really meant pressuring me to just accept what had happened and move on for the sake of family harmony. Flora, you're being unreasonable, my father said during one particularly painful phone call. It's just money. Derek's your brother. This is what family does. Just money. My money that I had earned, that I had saved, that I had worked overtime to accumulate. Just money that represented my security, my future plans, my emergency fund. Just money that they felt entitled to because we shared DNA. I was drowning in anger and hurt, but underneath it all was this terrible realization that I had been enabling this behavior for years. Every time I said yes to their requests, every time I fixed their problems, every time I prioritized family peace over my own boundaries, I had been teaching them that my consent was optional. But something inside me finally snapped. Maybe it was the cumulative effect of years of being taken advantage of. Maybe it was the shock of having my money stolen while I slept. Maybe I just finally reached my limit. Whatever it was, I knew I couldn't let this slide. I couldn't just swallow my anger and pretend everything was fine, like I always had before. For the first time in my life, I decided to fight back. I started by gathering evidence, screenshots of every conversation, bank statements showing the unauthorized transaction, documentation of my mother's access to my account. I was methodical about it, approaching it like the professional I am. This wasn't going to be an emotional family argument that got swept under the rug. This was going to be handled properly. Then I called my bank back and formally disputed the charge. I explained that the transaction was unauthorized, that while my mother technically had access to the account, she did not have permission to make this specific transaction after I had explicitly refused. I froze the account and removed her access immediately. The bank representative was surprisingly supportive. This happens more often than you'd think, she told me. Family financial abuse is real, and you have every right to protect your assets. Family financial abuse. Hearing those words out loud was like a punch to the gut, because it gave a name to what I had been experiencing for years. It wasn't just family helping family. It was abuse disguised as love, manipulation disguised as tradition. When my family found out about the dispute, the reaction was swift and predictable. My phone exploded with angry messages and missed calls. Derek was furious that his trip might be canceled. My parents were disappointed in my selfishness and vindictiveness. How could you do this to your own brother? My mother demanded in a voicemail that I saved and still listen to sometimes when I need to remind myself why I made the choices I did. He's already told his friends about the trip. You're going to humiliate him. I'm going to humiliate him, not them for stealing from me, not Derek for expecting me to fund his vacation, me for having the audacity to want my money back. The guilt they tried to heap on me was enormous. They painted me as the villain in this story, the selfish sister who cared more about money than family. They used every manipulation tactic they had perfected over the years: guilt, shame, obligation, fear of abandonment. If you go through with this, it's going to destroy our family, my father said during one of our last conversations before I went completely silent. But you know what? I was done caring about a family that had already been destroyed by years of disrespect, entitlement, and financial abuse. I was done being the designated family savior who was expected to sacrifice her own well-being for everyone else's comfort. So I stopped responding. I let their calls go to voicemail. I didn't read their text messages. I didn't engage with their attempts to guilt me back into compliance. For the first time in my adult life, I chose my own peace over their comfort. Those first few weeks of silence were simultaneously the hardest and most liberating of my life. The hardest because going against family conditioning feels like betraying everything you've been taught about love and loyalty. Liberating because I finally understood what it felt like to prioritize my own needs and boundaries. I used some of my remaining savings to book myself a solo trip to Portugal, something I had been putting off for years because there was always some family financial emergency that took priority. Sitting in a cafe in Lisbon, watching the sunset over the Tagus River, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: peace. For the first time, I wasn't worried about who needed money, who had a crisis that required my intervention, who was disappointed in me for not solving their problems. I was just Flora, a woman enjoying her own company and her own choices. The trip gave me perspective on just how toxic my family dynamics had become. Away from their constant demands and guilt trips, I could see clearly how much of my life I had sacrificed to keep them happy, how much of my financial security I had compromised to fund their poor decisions, how much of my emotional energy I had spent managing their feelings while neglecting my own. When I returned home, there were dozens of messages waiting for me, some angry, some pleading, some trying different manipulation tactics. Derek had apparently told everyone that I was having a breakdown and being irrational about money. My extended family had been recruited to reach out and convince me to forgive and forget. But something had shifted in me during those weeks of silence. Their words didn't have the same power anymore. Their guilt trips felt transparent and manipulative rather than compelling. For the first time, I could see their behavior clearly without the fog of family obligation clouding my judgment. The bank investigation concluded in my favor. The charges were reversed, and my money was returned to my account. Derek's trip was indeed canceled, which prompted another round of angry messages that I deleted without reading. But here's the thing that really surprised me. Slowly, gradually, some of my family members started to acknowledge what had happened. Derek facing the consequences of his actions, and the judgment of friends who learned why his trip was canceled, actually reached out with what seemed like genuine remorse. "Flora, I know I messed up," he wrote in a text that I almost deleted immediately. "I shouldn't have asked Mom to book the trip after you said no. I shouldn't have expected you to always bail me out. I'm starting to pay you back the money I owe you from before. It's not much yet, but it's a start." It wasn't much, $50 transferred to my account, but it was more acknowledgement of his debt than I had ever received before. More importantly, It was the first time he had ever admitted that his behavior was wrong rather than just unfortunate circumstances beyond his control. My parents took longer to come around, but even they eventually began to show signs of understanding. My mother called one evening, not to demand or guilt trip, but to actually listen. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began hesitantly, "about how we've been treating you, about the money and the expectations. I guess I never really thought about how it felt from your side." It wasn't a full apology, but it was more acknowledgement than I had ever received. She admitted that removing my consent from financial decisions was wrong, that treating me like a family ATM was unfair, that expecting me to always be the solution to everyone else's problems was unreasonable. These conversations were painful and awkward and often felt too little too late. But they were also necessary. For the first time in our family's history, we were having honest discussions about money, boundaries, and respect, instead of just assuming that family meant unlimited access to each other's resources. The process of rebuilding relationships on my terms was slow and often frustrating. There were setbacks, times when old patterns tried to reassert themselves, times when someone forgot and made a financial demand they had no right to make. But each time I held firm to my boundaries. Each time I chose my own well-being over their comfort. I'm not going to pretend this story has a perfect happy ending where everything went back to normal and we all learned valuable lessons and became a perfectly functional family. Real life doesn't work that way, especially when you're dealing with years of established toxic patterns. But what did happen was that I learned something crucial about myself and about love. I learned that real love doesn't require you to sacrifice your financial security, your boundaries, or your sense of self. Real love doesn't use guilt and manipulation to get what it wants. Real love respects no as a complete sentence. I learned that setting boundaries doesn't make you selfish, it makes you healthy. That choosing your own well-being doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you responsible for your own life in a way that no one else can be. Most importantly, I learned that I am not responsible for fixing everyone else's problems, managing everyone else's emotions, or funding everyone else's dreams at the expense of my own. Today, my relationship with my family is different. We still love each other, but that love now comes with clear boundaries and mutual respect. Derek has continued to make small payments toward his debt, and more importantly, he hasn't asked me for money since the incident. My parents have stopped treating me like their personal financial advisor and emergency fund. The silence in my phone where their demands used to be has been filled with peace, with my own goals and dreams, with relationships that don't require me to give up pieces of myself to maintain them. I still struggle sometimes with the conditioning of years of being the family fixer. There are moments when someone has a problem, and my first instinct is still to open my wallet and solve it. But now I pause. I ask myself what I want to do, not what I'm expected to do. I consider whether helping in this situation serves my values or just enables destructive patterns. Sometimes I choose to help anyway, but now it's a choice made from a place of strength and clear boundaries rather than guilt and obligation. The difference is profound. Looking back on that terrible night when I discovered my money had been stolen, I realized it was actually a gift in disguise. It was the wake-up call I needed to see how completely I had lost myself in the role of family savior. It was the catalyst that forced me to choose between my own well-being and everyone else's comfort. I chose myself, and for the first time in my adult life, that choice didn't fill me with guilt. It filled me with relief. If you're listening to this and recognizing yourself in my story, if you're the one everyone calls when they need money or need their problems solved, If you're tired of being treated like a resource rather than a person, I want you to know that you have the right to say no. You have the right to prioritize your own financial security and emotional well being. You have the right to be loved without conditions and without constant sacrifice. Setting boundaries with family is one of the hardest things you'll ever do because it goes against everything we're taught about love and loyalty. But sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for them is to stop enabling destructive patterns and start demanding the respect you deserve. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. You don't have to give up your dreams to fund other people's irresponsibility. You don't have to accept financial abuse just because it comes wrapped in family expectations. The people who truly love you will respect your boundaries, even if they don't like them at first. The people who can't love you without taking advantage of you aren't people you need in your life, regardless of your shared DNA. I'm 29 years old, and I'm just now learning what healthy love looks like. I'm just now learning that I deserve relationships that don't require me to constantly prove my worth through financial sacrifice. I'm just now learning that peace is worth more than the approval of people who only value what I can give them. It's been a painful journey, but it's also been the most important one of my life. For the first time, I'm living for myself instead of just existing to solve other people's problems. For the first time, my money is my own, my choices are my own, my life is my own. And that feeling of ownership over my own existence, that's worth every uncomfortable conversation, every moment of family tension, every accusation of selfishness I endured to get here. I'm Flora Watson. I'm 29 years old, and I finally learned how to say no and mean it. I finally learned that my love doesn't have to cost me my security, my peace, or my self-respect. And honestly, that's the most valuable lesson I've ever learned.